Alex Miller shifted uncomfortably as the TSA agent's eyes narrowed. His military ID, combat boots, and rigid posture screamed veteran. But something in the agent's expression suggested trouble. Another airport, another day of being misunderstood. If only he knew what was coming. Part 1. Initial conflict and misunderstanding, 450 words. Step aside, sir. The TSA agent, Richard according to his crooked name tag, motioned Alex toward a secondary screening area, his voice carrying the practiced indifference of someone who'd said the same words hundreds of times before. Alex complied, military habits dying hard. 8 years in the Army, 3 tours in Afghanistan, and somehow airport security always made him feel like a criminal. He placed his worn military backpack on the counter. The unit patches still visible despite fraying edges. ID and boarding pass, Richard demanded, barely looking up. Alex handed over his military ID and first-class boarding pass. The agent's eyebrows rose slightly at the ticket class, then at the ID, his gaze shifting between Alex's face and the identification. First class? Richard's tone carried unmistakable skepticism. Special occasion? My father's retirement ceremony, Alex replied evenly. Military family. Richard snorted. Military, huh? Which branch? The question wasn't friendly. It was a challenge. Army. 10th Mountain Division. Afghanistan. Richard studied the ID closer, flipping it over, holding it up to the light. Miller? This says you're a sergeant. Was a sergeant. Retired 2 years ago. A passenger bumped into a metal detector nearby, creating a sharp, loud clang. Alex flinched involuntarily, his right hand twitching slightly. Richard noticed immediately. You seem nervous, Sergeant. The title sounded like an insult from his mouth. Any particular reason? I'm fine, Alex said, a muscle in his jaw tightening. The crowded security area, the noise, the fluorescent lights, everything was becoming too much. Hands shaking a bit there, Richard observed loudly, turning to his colleague. Hey, Mark, look at this guy's hands. Several people in line turned to look. Alex forced his hands to stay still, focusing on his breathing like his therapist had taught him. I have PTSD, Alex said quietly. Loud noises sometimes. PTSD, huh? Richard interrupted. Convenient excuse for looking suspicious. Alex felt his chest tighten. I'm not suspicious. I'm a veteran trying to catch a flight. Richard smiled thinly. You'd be surprised how many veterans we get through here with things to hide. He made air quotes around veterans. My idea is legitimate, Alex replied, his voice level despite the heat rising in his neck. Richard pressed a button under his desk. We'll see about that. In my experience, real soldiers don't jump at every little noise. He pointed at the backpack. What's in there? Personal items. Nothing prohibited. We'll be the judge of that, Richard said as 2 security officers approached from behind. Random security check. Sir, standard procedure. Alex knew it wasn't random. It wasn't standard. But he also knew better than to argue. Not here. Not yet. The 2 security officers flanked Alex, their faces professionally blank. The taller one, Harrison according to his badge, gestured toward a screening table. Arms out, feet apart, Harrison instructed. Alex complied, the familiar stance reminiscent of military inspections. As Harrison conducted the pat-down, the second officer began methodically emptying Alex's backpack. What's this? The officer held up a folded tactical knife. Standard issue. It's TSA compliant. Blade under 3 inches. Alex explained calmly. The officer placed it aside, suspiciously, before continuing to rummage. From the bag emerged a small metal case with the Army Infantry insignia engraved on top, several medication bottles, and a worn tactical vest. Sir, what's the purpose of carrying military equipment? Harrison asked, eyeing the vest. It's not equipment, it's a memento. The vest is decommissioned, no ballistic plates, nothing functional. Richard had wandered over, watching the search with visible satisfaction. Pretty elaborate mementos. Almost like you're preparing for something. Alex felt his pulse quickening, but kept his voice steady. I'm a veteran, not a threat. What's in these? The second officer shook the prescription bottles. Prescribed medication for PTSD and injuries sustained in combat. A lot of pills here, Richard remarked loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. What exactly are you treating? Or distributing? The implication hung in the air. Several travelers stepped further away, casting nervous glances. Those are my prescribed medications, Alex repeated, his voice tightening. You can call my VA doctor if you... And this... Harrison interrupted, holding up the metal case. Alex's stomach dropped. Please be careful with that. It contains dog tags for my squad. Men who didn't come home. Harrison began to open it, his fingers pressing awkwardly against the clasp. Sir, please, it's fragile. Too late. The clasp gave way unexpectedly. Harrison fumbled, and the case slipped from his hands, hitting the floor with a sickening crack. The lid popped open, and metal dog tags scattered across the tile floor, spinning and sliding under people's feet. Alex moved instinctively, dropping to his knees to retrieve them. No! Stay where you are, Harrison ordered, misinterpreting the sudden movement. Alex ignored him, scrambling to collect the scattered tags. His fingers closed around one, Martinez, his squad leader who'd saved his life before losing his own to an IED. I said freeze. Harrison's hand clamped down on Alex's shoulder. Something snapped inside Alex. The noise, the lights, the touch, it all triggered something primal. His training took over. In one fluid motion, he twisted away, breaking the hold and rising to a defensive stance. Don't touch me. His voice wasn't his own anymore. It was distant, as if someone else was speaking. The second officer lunged forward. Alex sidestepped, military reflexes taking command of his body. Before he could stop himself, he had executed a perfect takedown, sending the officer stumbling into a stack of plastic bins. People gasped. Someone screamed. Phones were raised, recording everything. We have a hostile security breach. Richard shouted, backing away dramatically. Alex froze, suddenly aware of what he'd done. But it was too late, for more officers were rushing toward him, tasers drawn. They came at him from all directions. One officer grabbed Alex's arm, twisting behind his back. Another swept his legs, bringing him down hard on the tile floor. A knee pressed into his back, forcing the air from his lungs. I'm not resisting, Alex managed to say, but his words were lost in commotion. Stay down. Do not move. An officer shouted inches from his ear. Around them, a crowd had formed. Phones captured every moment of his humiliation. Someone whispered, is he a terrorist? Another voice, must be on drugs. Alex's face pressed against the cold floor, his cheeks scraping against the tile. One of the dog tags lay inches from his face. Johnson, the medic who'd held his hand after the ambush, telling jokes while they waited for evacuation. The tags, Alex gasped. Please, just let me collect the tags. Shut up, came the harsh reply as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Richard stood nearby, arms crossed, satisfaction evident on his face. See? This is exactly what I was talking about. That's not PTSD, that's aggression. Dangerous. Alex was pulled roughly to his feet, surrounded by officers. Travelers gave him a wide berth, staring with a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. His belongings remained scattered across the floor, his medication, his clothes, his memories. One officer was examining his phone. Who were you texting before this incident? Any accomplices? My father, Alex said, his voice hollow. He's meeting me at the airport. Yeah, right, Richard scoffed. Let me guess, he's some big-shot military commander coming to save you? Alex said nothing, just stared at the scattered dog tags no one bothered to pick up. Get him to the security office, an officer ordered, as they marched him through the terminal. Alex felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on him, a veteran who'd survived war zones only to be treated like a criminal in his own country. When his phone buzzed in an officer's hand, he knew it was his father calling back. But it was too late for that now. The humiliation burned deeper than any battlefield wound ever had. The security office was bright white and sterile, with no windows and a single metal table bolted to the floor. Alex sat handcuffed to a chair while Henderson, the terminal supervisor, reviewed his file on a tablet. "Sergeant Miller," Henderson finally said, placing the tablet on the table. "Quite an incident you caused today." "I reacted to being physically restrained," Alex replied. "It was an instinctive response." Henderson's face remained impassive. "You assaulted a TSA officer." "I defended myself when triggered. I have documented PTSD." Henderson glanced at the report. "Yes, so you claim," along with claiming to be Army 10th Mountain Division, first-class ticket holder, and son of some military officer. Alex stared in disbelief. "Those aren't claims. They're facts. Check my ID. Call my father, Colonel William Miller, Special Forces, retired last month." "Colonel William Miller?" Henderson repeated with a hint of sarcasm. "The William Miller who received the Medal of Honor? Who commanded the rescue operation in Kandahar? That's your father?" "Yes." Henderson laughed shortly. "Of course. And I suppose he's flying on Air Force One. He's already at the airport. He was meeting me for the connecting flight." Henderson leaned forward. "Listen, Mr. Miller, we've searched your belongings. Your military ID looks legitimate, but there are inconsistencies with your story. Your behavior has been erratic. Until we can verify your identity and assess whether you pose a flight risk, you will not be boarding any aircraft today." "This is unbelievable," Alex said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Your boarding pass has been suspended pending further investigation," Henderson continued. "Once we completed our verification process, which could take hours, you'll be notified." "And my personal belongings?" "The dog tags." Henderson glanced at his notes. "They'll be returned after inspection." "Those are memorials of fallen soldiers," Alex said, his voice rising. "They're not contraband." "Then you'll get them back," Henderson replied dismissively. "Once we're satisfied." Alex sat alone in the public terminal, relegated to a bench near baggage claim, his military backpack, now haphazardly repacked, at his feet. His hand ached to sift through it, to check if all the dog tags had been recovered, but he restrained himself. More attention was the last thing he needed. His phone had been returned, but his boarding pass remained confiscated. A message from his father showed he called 3 times during the detention. Alex had texted him the situation, keeping his words measured despite the rage and shame coursing through him. The terminal hummed with activity. Families reuniting, travelers rushing, airport staff directing traffic. Nobody looked at him directly, but Alex felt their sidelong glances. The veteran with the problem, the military guy who snapped, then the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't dramatic at first, just a subtle change in the air pressure, a collective straightening of postures among airport staff. Then Alex saw him. Colonel William Miller walked through the terminal with the measured pace of a man accustomed to command. At 62, he carried himself with the same rigid discipline he displayed during 3 decades of military service. His civilian clothes, navy blazer, pressed khakis, didn't disguise his military bearing. The Medal of Honor wasn't visible, but its presence was implied in the way he carried himself. Airport staff reflexively moved aside. Security personnel stood straighter. Something in his eyes, steel blue, unwavering, commanded respect without demanding it. When those eyes found Alex, they softened momentarily before hardening again as they took in his son's disheveled appearance. "Dad," Alex said, standing as his father approached. Colonel Miller assessed his son with a quick, practiced glance, noting the scraped cheek, the tension in his shoulders, the barely concealed anger. "What happened?" His voice was quiet, but carried the weight of authority. Alex explained in precise military terms the initial confrontation, the escalation, the dog tags, the takedown. No excuses, just facts. The colonel listened without interruption, his expression unchanging except for a slight tightening around his eyes at the mention of the scattered dog tags. "Where's the supervisor who confiscated your boarding pass?" "Henderson, Terminal Security Office." Colonel Miller nodded once. "Wait here." "Dad, they won't listen?" "They'll listen to me." It wasn't arrogance. It was certainty born from decades of command. "Trust the chain of command, Alex. You taught me what happened. Now I'll handle it." He turned toward the security checkpoint. And as he walked, people instinctively stepped aside. A TSA agent who started to approach him with the standard "Sir, you can't," fell silent mid-sentence as the colonel fixed him with a gaze that had once directed special operations in 3 conflict zones. Alex watched his father disappear into the terminal, standing a little straighter himself. 15 minutes later, Alex watched as his father returned, flanked by Henderson and another man in a more expensive suit. Phillips, the regional director, according to his badge. The change in Henderson was remarkable. The smug confidence had evaporated, replaced by a nervous deference that bordered on fear. Phillips looked grave, his eyes darting between the colonel and Alex. "Sergeant Miller," Phillips began formally, "on behalf of Airport Security and the Transportation Security Administration, I want to extend our sincerest apologies for the incident earlier today." Alex remained silent, waiting. There was a series of miscommunications and procedural errors. Phillips continued, "Your military status should have been respected, your medical condition accommodated, and your personal belongings handled with appropriate care." Henderson stepped forward reluctantly. "I personally apologize for questioning the validity of your identity and military service. It was unprofessional and disrespectful." Alex looked at his father, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "What about the officer who started this? Richard?" Alex asked. Phillips cleared his throat. "He has been removed from duty pending review. His conduct was entirely unacceptable. And my belongings? The memorial case? The dog tags?" Henderson produced a paper bag. "Everything has been collected and verified, sir, including all 7 dog tags." Colonel Miller took the bag, checking the contents himself before handing it to his son. "Your boarding pass has been reissued," Phillips added. "First class, as originally purchased. We've also arranged priority boarding and a security escort to ensure no further incidents." The colonel's expression remained stern. "This isn't about convenience. It's about respect." "Yes, sir," Phillips acknowledged. "We're implementing immediate remedial training for all staff on proper interaction with military personnel and individuals with PTSD. What happened today will not happen again." The words sounded rehearsed, but the fear behind them was genuine. Colonel William Miller's name carried weight, and they all knew it. After clearing security without incident, the new TSA agents practically saluting as they passed, Alex and his father found a quiet corner in the first-class lounge. The colonel carefully opened the metal case, examining each dog tag before placing it back inside. "Martinez, Johnson, Patel," he recited quietly. "I remember when you wrote home about them." Alex nodded, watching his father's hands, steady, respectful, handle the memorials. "I lost it back there," Alex admitted. "All the training, all the therapy, and I still lost control." The colonel looked up. "You were protecting them," he said, nodding toward the tags. "Just like you protected them over there." "I failed them over there." "No, son, you honored them. You still do." The colonel closed the case gently. "The men whose names are in this box, they knew the risks. So did you. So did I. Every time I sent men like you into combat." Alex stared at the closed case. "Sometimes I think civilians will never understand." "They don't have to understand to show respect," his father replied. "That's what was missing today, not understanding, but basic human respect." They sat in silence for a moment. 2 generations of soldiers, the weight of service visible in different ways. The colonel's measured dignity, Alex's battle-hardened vigilance. "I'm proud of you," the colonel finally said, "not despite your struggles, but because of how you faced them." He placed a hand firmly on his son's shoulder. "The strongest soldiers aren't the ones who never fall. They're the ones who get back up, carrying their wounds and their memories." Alex nodded, his throat tight. No further words were needed between them. We've all seen it. The raised eyebrows, the sudden distance, the quick judgments. For veterans like Alex, these small indignities accumulate into wounds as real as any battlefield injury. But when we recognize the sacrifice behind a uniform, whether worn currently or carried in memory, we begin to understand our responsibility. What would you have done if you witnessed the scene at the airport? How do we better honor those who serve when they return home? Share your thoughts below. And if you know a veteran Take a moment today to acknowledge not just their service, but their ongoing journey. Subscribe for more stories that matter.